Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz to a realistic map of meaning, where we're reading his wonderful book. We only do half-hour sessions, so let's just see how the rabbi's doing. Shalom, Rabbi. We're live on the air. We're going to turn it over to you, sir. And
Thank you, Dan. Tonight, tomorrow night starts the Feast of Esther, Purim, in the Hebrew name. And I thought I'd just take a moment to prepare a little for that. And it's on Purim, it celebrates the events of the Megillah of Esther, the scroll of Esther. The story told there. It's just a long story. And you know what's unusual about that scroll, that book in the Torah?
Hashem's not mentioned in it.
That's correct. It's the only book where God's name is not mentioned at all. And so the question is, okay, why not? Um, the answer is that it was an example of our current relationship. It was actually a cause for great joy because the events transpired during the 70-year exile between the two temples. The first temple was destroyed. There was a 70-year exile. The Babylonians destroyed the temple. They were exiled to Babylon, and then they
In
came back with
Shushan,
Ezra. Yeah, and they started rebuilding the temple afterwards. And each time we had a temple was about 400 plus years. So there was the tabernacle that they built in the wilderness that we had used that for 400 years. Then King Shlomo built the permanent temple in Jerusalem, in Jerusalem. That lasted a little over 400 years, and it was destroyed. And then Ezra and his colleagues built the second one, which lasted again another 400 plus years, with lots happening in between. But the point is that this happened in a very sort of a biblical period, and the Jews had just been exiled for the first time since they got into Israel. So they had some ups and downs, but this was a big downer. I guess it was equivalent to the Holocaust. Now, some people may feel the Holocaust was a bigger view. It certainly was more recent, but it was of a similar proportion, a similar size tragedy, and all was lost. Jews felt that they had completely lost. So the fact that God protected them through this story of event was a sign that no, God had not abandoned the Jewish people. He just remained hidden, and much more hidden than before, and would be a different sort of relationship going forward. And through this, our understanding is that the Jewish people finally accepted willingly the oral Torah, which was really the authority of the rabbis in terms of how they manage maybe the best word, manage the Jewish people, guide them through life.
Lead
Lead them, as opposed to politicians or warriors or kings. But we've hearkened to the court system, which is composed of the rabbis. So the story that's told over the Megillah has several parts, and it seems to be a very simple-minded story. Children always like it, which is a giveaway. And I wanted to share with you an insight into really how sophisticated it was, that was developed by a great rabbi that lived in the 1800s, called the Malbim. But that's his acronym. He wrote a book which in English is called Turnabout. The key word of Purim is how everything turned upside down, turnabout. So the simple story is that there was during this period a king. His name is Achashverosh. It's a little hard to pronounce, so just call him the king. And the story starts that he invites everybody to this huge feast in his capital. He has a special capital city, and he makes a feast for everybody and different levels of feast. and everybody gets their own wine and their own drink, and it's really very, very extravagant. And the Jews participate maybe in a way they shouldn't have, um, and that may have been the reason why the problems arose. But during this time, he becomes so like a little drunk, and he asks his queen to come to his party and parade herself around to show her beauty, which she didn't find very tasteful. So she refused, and he became very upset about that, and eventually dethroned her, maybe killed her, but certainly dethroned her. And then sometime afterwards became wanting a queen. So somebody suggested, well, why not have a beauty contest and pick the most beautiful woman in the realm in the empire, which controlled the entire civilized world at the time, because he inherited that Babylonian empire. Um, I shouldn't say inherited. He took over that Babylonian empire that conquered Israel and everybody else, and so he was just the top of the world, and so he had this beauty contest, and so they sent out agents and they collected every beautiful girl in the whole realm, whether they wanted to come or not wanted to come. And most of them wanted to come, I guess, because you had a chance to become the queen. There weren't that many civil rights in those days, so this was a big opportunity. Um, and as it turns out, there was a Jewish girl, Esther, who got caught up in the search, and tells the story on how every woman every girl that was conscripted into this beauty pageant prepared themselves with the beauty program for a long time until the king called for them, and he would actually really have a night with each one um, to decide which one was fair enough. And it wasn't until that the met Esther, she conquered him right away. He decided to make her the queen, and but she never told him she was Jewish. She Mordecai had her uncle Mordecai, who was it's not it's not told outright in the story, but we understood that Mordecai, her uncle, was really the head rabbi of the time. He was the head of the court. He told her, "Don't tell them where you come from." And so you didn't know, it's fine. But he made her the queen. And then shortly after that, there's a sub story about how two guards were in the palace decided to try and assassinate the king. And Mordecai found out about it. The reason Mordecai found out about it, again, not in the story, but we know from other sources that because all the heads of the Jewish court, in order to judge properly, had to understand witnesses or people that came to report things in their native tongue. And so they had to be masters of 70 languages. So Mordecai was a master. He was conversant with 70 languages. Well, these guys were talking in their dialect from their province, thinking that they could speak freely. Nobody would understand what they were saying, but he overheard them and he understood they were planning to kill the king. So he told the queen, his niece, and she reported to the king this plot, and they investigated. They found it was true, and they killed these guys. And they recorded. She told him that it was Mordecai, her uncle, that had told him about that. So he had that recorded in his private diary. But meanwhile, there was a fellow who, in the court, who had been positioning himself to advance, and he had it recorded that he was the one that told the queen about this plot. And this guy's name was Haman, and he insinuated his way into the king's graces this way, telling him, "I really saved your life." With other things, he was also part of the one of the guys that suggested the beauty pageant in the first place, so that worked out well. So he gained credence with the king and climbed up the ladder and wound up becoming the prime minister of the country, the king's right-hand man. And he wanted to really lord it over everybody, so he used to insist everybody bow down to him and so on. But Mordechai refused to do that because, bowed down to false gods, and Haman was setting himself up as one. So he became incensed with Mordechai and decided he's going to try and get back at him. And he ran this lottery to decide when he should kill Mordechai. Not only was he going to kill Mordechai, he was going to kill the entire Jewish people, get really back at him, and show him. So so that's Purim means a lottery. And so he ran this lottery, and it turned out that the best day would be, according to the lottery, would be a year from then. The yesterday, a year from now. In other words, the latest possible date that could have turned out. So he started plotting, and he went to the king, and he offered to a huge king's ransom, literally, for permission to kill all the Jews. Of course, he doesn't worry about it too much because the Jews had a lot of money. If he'll just ransack their wealth and then share it with the king. And because the king was so enamored with him, so he gave him permission, and they sent out secret messages all across the kingdom that everybody was entitled to. And just like today, there's a lot of always Jew hatred for whatever reason. So people were quite willing to get the word to kill out the Jews, and so that was the program. Mordechai found out about this because, again, he spoke the language. He overheard the scribes that were sending out these messages in all the dialects of the kingdom, so he understood what was going on, and he sent a message. Well, he wound up sending a message to the queen that we're in dire problems, and you got to help out here. And she said, "Well, I'd love to help you, but what should I do? The king has been in isolation. I mean, nobody's allowed to go in and speak to him unless he sends for them. Otherwise, you're liable to death." Mordechai says, "Look, this is why God put you in that position, just for this reason, to be able to save people. So you've got to do what you got to do." So she said, "Okay, fast." So she said, "Pray to God, fast. This obviously something's wrong. We're being punished. There's a problem, so we're going to have to repent and mend our ways. And so I suggest we fast and pray to God and so on for 3 days, and then I'll go to the king." And so they all did that. The entire realm of Jewish population was told that they're in, with this problem, with this imminent danger, and they did accept the authority of Mordechai, although he didn't have really much clout to insist upon it. But the point was that they recognized his authority, they recognized his wisdom, and they took it upon themselves that he must be right, even though there probably wasn't money sense that he was, because all this was being done in secret. But that's they accepted the authority of the rabbis over themselves. And so now Esther's the plot continues to say that Esther, she's got to find out how to do this. So she invites the king to come to a party. She invites the king and Haman, the villain, to come to a private party, just her and them. And so he says, "Okay, whatever you want. You want a private party?" He was willing to. I forgot. She ventured into his private isolation booth. He was so shocked to see her because he knows that she wouldn't come. She was under pain of death if he wouldn't have happened to have his scepter at his side and be able to extend it to him, because that was the rule of the kingdom, that if you disturb the king, unless he was able to do this for you, to give you this royal scepter, then you were dead. So he realized that she had undertaken a very risky business, and he was he had fallen in love with her, and he wanted to help her. So he offered to. He said, "So whatever you want, I'll do this for you." She says, "Oh, come to a party." So she comes. So he says, "Okay, quick, call someone. Come to a party." So they come to the party. Nothing happens. They have the party. She doesn't reveal anything. He says, "So what do you want? What do you want? You're at the party, She says, "You know what? Come to another party tomorrow. Do the same. Let's do the same thing again." She says to, and so fine. So they arranged for a party the second day. Meanwhile, that night, he couldn't sleep. Something's bothering him. Can't sleep, the king. So he calls his no TV in those days or movie came out on Netflix. So he calls his agent, whatever, and he says, read me from my diary. Read me what's going on. Something's going on here. I don't understand it." So he reads from the diary, and he hears how Mordecai was the one that had saved his life by finding out this plot to kill him. Now his memory was that Haman was the one, and so um, so the story goes. This is the way I'm telling you the bold story first. I'll go back and fill in the details what the Malbim uncovered. Um, so he says, "Oh, so then how did we reward Mordecai for saving my life?" So there's no record of any reward. So that morning, Haman, after the first feast, he was so proud that he had been invited to it, just him, the king and the queen. So that he went home and he was like elated. He was, like on top of the world. But on the way out of the meeting, he passed Mordecai, who was fasting because of his problem. He was fasting in the king's courtyard, and he got incensed, seeing like his arch enemy. He's planning to kill this guy, and here he's right in his face. So he comes home. He says, "Look, everything's so beautiful for me, so great, but except this one guy. He's ruining the whole thing. He's the big fly in the ointment." So his wife says, "Well, so just set up a big hanging gallows and kill him. Go ask the king. You got to get him killed right away, so you don't have to worry about him anymore." So, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So the next day, he's coming in the morning, first thing, to ask the king permission to kill Mordecai, when the king just learned that Mordecai's the one that saved his life. He just heard the story, it was just read to him, and he thought it was Haman that saved his life. So he asks, "Well, how do we reward him?" He said, "No, we didn't." So somebody's at the door. Who's at the door? Haman's at the door. "Oh, let him in." He says to Haman, right? He says, "How should I reward somebody that I want to show that I appreciate him so much? What should I do for the guy?" So Haman says, "Well, why don't you dress him in the king's clothes, put him on the king's horse, and have him read through the streets? This is the way the king, honors those that he likes." So the king right away says, "Okay, you go do that for Mordecai." So he's coming to kill Mordecai, and here it's starting to turn around. And he has to go do this for Mordecai. Instead of killing him, he's got to honor him. So he leads him through the streets, and he's shouting out this. And he comes home, and he's so embarrassed by the whole thing. And just then, the king's guards come to summon him to the second meeting, to the next party for the queen and queen. So he comes to the next party, and this time Esther. So the king asks again, "Esther, what is it you want?" And Esther, stands up and says, "I want you to protect us from this evil, wicked person. Haman is trying to kill my people and me." And the king throws into a rage. He goes in a rage. "What are you talking about?" He runs out the room to clear his head, and he's walking. So meanwhile, Haman sees he's really, things really turn around quickly for him. So he falls on the queen's, like they used to eat on couches. They were reclining on the couches. So he falls on her lap to beg for mercy because something's going wrong here. He's so astounded what happened here. And just as he's falling on her lap, the king comes back from his walk, thinks he's trying to rape. He's trying to rape the queen in the king's house. And he says, "Off of his head." And he sends them, they kill him. And then the whole thing gets turned around. And finally, the Mordecai gets revealed as the savior and also as her uncle. And he gets raised up, and he takes over Haman's position and runs the country. And that's the end of the story. Now, that's the Megillah. That's the bald pace of the Megillah. The overview. What the Malbim uncovered was that this guy he was not the natural heir to the throne. He was a commoner who had become extremely wealthy and amassed a huge amount, like the Bill Gates, or I don't want to say Bill Gates, but like the one of these guys, the Russian oligarch of the day, who had acquired all this money and raised an army, the Putin, if you like, of the day, and he had and that's why he threw this big party at the beginning of the story, because he feels like people don't accept him as the natural leader, that he's concerned that there was a hierarchy and he overtook it, and they don't recognize what he did. So he's trying to buy their loyalty. So he throws this huge party, and it's sharing the wealth with them, so that they'll become, fans. That they'll buy into his regime. And meanwhile, he had Vashti, his wife, the one that the queen that didn't want to show up, that he had dethroned. She was the granddaughter of the previous emperor of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar is the guy that had destroyed the temple, and yeah, and had amassed the empire in the first place. She was his granddaughter, so she was royalty. So that's why he married her, because that gave him credibility, that gave him the credence, that the credentials that he needed to be in the real seat, right? But he didn't want to do it because she was his wife. He wanted people to recognize for what he did, for what he was. He was a very clever, mind and vast of fortune and strategician. What's the word I'm pronouncing it right? Strategist. He organized all this. There are people like this that mastermind everything. They're very, very well. No, but that's the ego that comes with it. But they have the talent to do it. And he was such a man, so he wanted to be recognized for that. So that's why when he made this big party, he insisted that his queen come in front and show her beauty. So I didn't marry her because she's the emperor's granddaughter. I married her because she's a beautiful woman, like everybody else. That. So she saw what was going on. She didn't want to fall for that. She said, "I know I'm a queen in my own right. I'm the granddaughter of the famous Nebuchadnezzar." So she refused to come. So she was undermining the very thing he was trying to achieve. It was just the exact opposite. If he didn't take control of the situation, he would undo exactly what he was trying to do. So that's why he dethroned her. It wasn't a minor thing for him. It was a major slap in the face that she was threatening him with. And that's why she got dethroned. So then the next thing that happens is, meanwhile, the Jewish people had sinned by coming to this feast and participating in all the non-kosher food or whatever. And they say even that they had brought out the vessels from the temple that destroyed, that Nebuchadnezzar had looted from the temple, and they didn't say anything. So they really, you succumb to, just do, keep your head down and don't make trouble. That wasn't the right thing for them to do. So that was their sin. They were told by the rabbis, don't go. They went, they indulged. Now they're going to get in trouble. So Haman, as I said earlier, he was the one that insinuated himself into the king's favor by saying, I'm the one that saved your life. And he had this idea to make a beauty pageant. So he got raised up. And but the king was always very suspicious of people around him. He had to be neurotic, just like you imagine, like if you read accounts of Putin today, he's got to watch his back because people may not be on his side. I saw reports he's riding in a special railway car. He doesn't take airplanes; it's too easy to shoot down. And he's got to watch himself. So, and you live with this fear. There's neuroses. You've got to be super, super careful because everybody's out to get you, and that's this king. So, what happened was when she called a party, and he realized he's trying to figure out what the heck's going on. Something's going on because she risked her life to come see him, and he's not. He trusts people, but he's ready not to trust people. So when she doesn't want to tell him right away. So that's why he couldn't sleep at night, because something's afoot. And when he hears that it was not Haman who had saved his life, it was Mordechai, this upended his entire trust of the guy. He was relying on this guy as his best buddy, the guy that saved his life. He was totally committed to him. And now it turns out that he lied. He lied to me. It was all fake. So he doesn't trust him anymore. That was what happened the night after the first party. When Esther invited them to the party, she's looking to see the relationship between these two guys. Still, they're best buddies. There's nothing in between them. They're still best buddies. The king trusts Haman. She can't say anything. She has nothing to deal with. So it's that night God arranged that he couldn't sleep, and God arranged the book would open on its own, so to speak, to that story. And God arranged that he would hear finally that Mordechai is the one who saved his life. But by the way, God arranged that these two guys earlier would plot to kill him, and then he would find out about it and be able to save the king. This was all organized by God behind the scenes. That's why God's name doesn't appear, because it all, transpires as if, just so happened like this or but like that. But it's really God's hand in our life. This is the way God manages the world. Is that things happen, and it all looks normal to you, but it could have happened a different way. God's organizing it. So after the first party, when Esther looked and saw they were buddy buddy still, that night he found out that Haman was not his buddy. Now, when they come back to the second party the next day, Esther's looking into them, something's changed, totally changed. She can see it right away. Achashverosh is not behaving the same way to Haman. This is her chance. She stands up and accuses him of trying to kill her and her people. And Achashverosh now is just about ready to buy it. Just about ready to buy it. He gets up in a huff. I mean, this is his whole, he's been building his whole empire and his whole bureaucracy, all the guy, everything on this. He's got to rely on people. You can't do it yourself. You've got to have people you trust. So he walks out in a huff, and he comes back and he just finds him pleading for his life on her lap. But he thinks, in his rage, he thinks he's trying to rape the queen. That's how far gone he is. That he's reading into whatever he sees, the worst possible events, and off with his head. And so that's when
paranoia projection. Yeah,
exactly. So that's when the day is saved, and it's all these. When you understand the personalities that were work and the hypertension and the hysteria and the paranoia, then
the stress
it makes sense on a more adult level, and it reads much better. I'm just giving you the highlights of it. So I just wanted to.
Well, that's great. That covered our whole half hour.
Yeah, but I hope it gave you a new insight into the story.
I mean, to pull out what the Malbim said, that Hashem, allowed the king to have a loss of sleep and to open to that specific reading. I mean, to find out the root of the matter.
Right. And that's what God does all the time. And the Jews recognize it. I think it was a big thing when you think about it, how the people listened and understood that they had done something wrong a few years back, and now this was how the result of it, and they accepted it, and they entered into the fast and prayed and so on, accepted all that. So that's when we
returned
the rabbinic authority, that the rabbis do this for us, and that's been their case. The history all through is that our rabbis have never lived in palaces. They've never become wealthy by the stipends. If the people throw money at them, they're giving it right out back. They're humble, and they're self-effacing, and they live for the community and for others, and they live to study. They live to learn and know the answers and are ready
wisdom
to answer.
Hashem,
yeah, the wisdom, and people will bother them at all hours of the day, and they have no life, but they're serving God. So that's the people we respect. Those are the people that we listen to, and sometimes they'll say something that their own person say. Well, you'll read about some accounts, maybe in the some issues will come up. People will complain. What are they? You got to remember that they step back. The lesson of the Purim is you step back, you see that these people are dealing with Torah wisdom that has soaked through their whole entire body, and it comes out of their pores. That's the way they've trained themselves, and so that's what we accepted, and that's what how we live by these days. And
we try to warm ourselves by the coals of the Hakamim. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So the Chachamim mean the wise men. So that's a slice of the story that I wanted to share with you. Tomorrow night, we read the Megillah of the story from a scroll. We have to read it publicly. It's a public announcement. Then followed by a feast the next day. So I'll be back tomorrow night. We're reading the scroll at 7 o'clock. Takes about 45 minutes, so I should be ready for the 9 o'clock session, and we can continue. It might be
We'll continue with chapter 6 and 7 tomorrow.
right.
All
Okay.
right, folks. So there you have it. That's our Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz, giving us some behind the scenes stuff about Purim, and I love his message there from the Malbim. That was great. Hope you enjoyed it. But join us again tomorrow. We'll be back with more of his book, chapter 6, finishing it off and getting into chapter 7. So till then, have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
You should know the title of chapter 7. What's in it for God? Okay.